This episode of the School Zone podcast is brought to you by School Spirit Vending, hassle-free year-round fundraising for your school. At School Spirit Vending, we do all the work. You cash the check. Hey, School Zone listeners. Matt coming at you from Stephenville, Texas. I'm excited to be here today with none other than J. Michael Hall, the founder and president of Strong Fathers, Strong Families. And before I get Mike on to talk, I've got to share with listeners a kind of a funny story, a neat story. About 7.5 years ago, I attended my very first PTA event for the Texas PTA down in the Woodlands, Texas, with my company, School Spirit Vending. And at the time, Mike was one of the exhibitors at that event. We hit it off from the very beginning and spent a lot of time together in between breaks and that type of thing at that event. And here we are 7.5 years later, both of us definitely older, hopefully wiser, and continuing to do our thing. So, Mike, thanks for being here.
You bet. No, definitely remember, you guys hitting the scene and that young man that is probably not as young a man now, not just you, but your kids and all kind of people that were doing the work. And we're lucky to still be doing what we're doing. And we've been blessed, so it's been good.
So take a minute, tell folks about yourself, some of your background personally and professionally, and we'll launch right in.
All right. I am the father of two boys, two sons, because they're grown men now, 19 and 23. I keep reminding them that they're grown men. That way they can start paying their own bills. And father of two sons, husband to a beautiful reading teacher. I am the son of an old coach, and my mom was a school board member, so I grew up basically as a school brat. Went to school to teach agriculture, ended up teaching special education, and I am a former special ed teacher, former teacher of the gifted and talented. I am a recovering middle school principal. I was an intermediate and middle school principal for 4 years, and since then have been doing father engagement programs in schools and Head Starts around the country for the last 15 years, and then had my own business doing so for the last 12. We're about to launch into our 13th school year, and so that's what I do. We have certain programs that we'll talk about today, but we do those programs, and then we train people to do what we found to be successful. Just because we can't get everywhere we need to be, we want people doing this work as well. And so that's my background. We live on the family farm in Springtown, Texas. It's pretty handy because it's close to the DFW area, where I do a lot of work. And it's also about an hour from the airport, which I think this month I'm gonna make 5 round trips out of there. So it's teacher service month for me, and so I'm pretty busy. But it's a good spot. I live on a street named after my great grandfather, and kind of have that legacy that when we talk to dads, that may not come from that kind of background, we can talk about what it's supposed to look like. And I didn't do anything right, but I was born right. And I feel like that blessing is something we're trying to share with families, and talk about how do you get to that point to where, you've got generations of strong families, great kids, successful kids, generation after generation. And so very blessed to be here, very blessed to talk to you today.
So how did that family heritage translate into nearly 13 years ago starting a business?
The whole business side, really, I learned from both my mom and dad. My dad was a school teacher, so I always had to have at least a second job. And my mom was in business, and she was in marketing, and she was all about the hustle, just like dad was. And so I definitely learned that. Being on a farm, got a good work ethic. Also, because my dad was a teacher, he didn't provide a lot. He provided all I needed, but he didn't provide all I wanted. So, I was expected to buy my own cars. I was expected to pay for school, which I did, of course, with his here. So, but I owned my own business in college. I speak all over the country, and people ask me, a few people say, I want to do this. And I'm like, well, it takes a lot of work, takes a lot of miles. And they said, well, where do I start? I said, well, I started speaking when I was 9 years old at church, and always had a great fan club that really encouraged me to do that. So, was pretty fearless at a young age as far as getting up in front of people. But I had my own defensive driving agency in college. And if you really want to learn how to speak in front of people, put yourself in front of just, 15 to 20 really mad people all day on a Saturday. And you can speak anywhere after that. There's not a rougher crowd. I've spoken in prisons, and it was easier than, defensive driving. And so, did that. And then my dad had his own business. He had a fertilizer business. We ran around your part of the country quite a bit, putting out chemical granular fertilizer. And so when I went to start my own business, there was no doubt. And the reason I got into doing fatherhood is, as a principal, every kid that came through my office that had an academic or behavior problem, they either had no dad at home, or a lot of them had dads at home. They were not connected to their kids. They just didn't know what was going on. They weren't really part of it. And so as I tried to get them engaged, what I realized was I was kind of becoming the same dad, because I was spending such of my time raising other people's kids as a principal than I was raising my own. I was a real young principal. I had a real young family, and I don't think that people can't do it, but it just wasn't what we do. Both from had a pretty tough situation, and then with two young kids and just wanting to be a certain way as a family, I just had to change. I went back to teaching for a year and was doing some fatherhood stuff. And then I went to work for a group out of Austin for 3 years, and the whole business started because that nonprofit imploded, and I just couldn't stop doing the work. I was just devoted to what we were doing. We were seeing guys make changes. And since then, we developed our own products, of course, and our own program. And we've been doing that, like I said, for 12 years.
So talk a little bit more about what you provide for schools, the different programs and that type of thing, because, it seems like the schools are having to get more and more and more involved in family life as time goes on, because we have so many broken families and that type of stuff in our culture today. So how do you support the schools in their effort, and what are some of the services that you provide?
Well, and that's one of the things that I found out real early as a principal was, and the research has been there and people have known it, that when parents are engaged in a kid's education, that kid's going to do so much better. The challenge has been, when I was an administrator, was families are kind of, spread apart and split apart, and you have that issue, which is definitely a problem. But also because of that, it wasn't just automatic that mom and dad were coming to everything. On top of that, moms and dads that are together are so busy working. Back in the day, my grandmother in Birdville ISD, she was a lifelong member of PTA. And it's interesting because, you and I both work with PTA, and it didn't hit me until I'd done this business probably 6 or 7 years. It's like, wait, I even have a PTA legacy. My grandmother was famous for what was going on at, the state PTA convention. The problem was, I don't know that it was anything I want to admit to. What happens in Austin stays in Austin is what I think was happening. But so I had that history, and my grandfather was the first president of the Dads Club of South Birdville Elementary in Birdville ISD. But that was a time when everybody was expected to do that. It was they had time to do that, if you will. They didn't they weren't as busy as we were much as it. And I think the schools kind of didn't evolve with the family needs. And one of our jobs now is to say what gets families out, particularly fathers, but families in general. What are their needs? What's working? And so what we've done over the last 12 years is we've developed 4 academic programs and a way to promote it in such a way that, seriously, in the last 5 years, we have not had a full cafeteria, just to the hilt full of dads and kids and as well doing these academic activities. And when I meet and train with schools, the idea is that families just don't want to come, and that's absolutely not true. But they don't want to come to what we used to do. And so our job is, and our stuff's not that innovative to me, but we have innovated it from the point of where are the folks at, what do they need, and let's meet those needs instead of asking the school or instead of asking the parents to meet the school where it's at. That's the problem. We kind of treat our parents not as our customer, and they truly are. So we do a bring your dad to school day, a dad and kid math night, a dad and kid reading night, a dad and kid science night. And so by doing so, and we typically contract with schools to facilitate these programs. So when we do it, we put out all the promotional materials. We build the flyers for them. I show up and actually do the program, or a couple of guys that work for me. And we bring our supplies and we make that thing happen. I mean, I've been there when the principals couldn't be there. And if they'll just open the door, we make that thing happen. So we'll see anywhere from 180 to 250 dads on a morning. And we average about 80 to 120 families a night with our night programs. And that's in a big school. We still run about 80 to 120 families because there's so many other things going on in the community. In a small school, which there are plenty around Texas and around the country, we average the same amount because a lot of times we're the show in town that night. So that's what we do. And what we've done is we've taken all those successful programs and we've built them into a curriculum that is easy to read, easy to follow, step by step, and it's all four of those events with all the resources you need to make that happen. And so we have a strong schools curriculum that we found what is successful. Luckily, I think we've written it in a way that people can actually follow it. That was our concern, and we've had a lot of successful schools with it. And so we found if they follow our advice, they follow our directions, we've just built in elements that make it happen. And we found it out because we've been doing it for so long. 160,000 dads, you learn a lot doing that.
Wow, 160,000 dads. Let me ask, it might be kind of an odd question, but just to get more to the root of what you guys do, why is it strong fathers, strong families instead of strong mothers, strong families? Aside from the fact that you're a dad, obviously, but
yeah, I don't speak mom, which is very true. I have a joke in my training about how women speak differently than men. And if any of us men, because I was the only guy on the campus as a teacher, I was the only guy on campus as a principal. And I will tell you, not just in our marriage, not just in our churches, but on the school campus, men and women, we don't talk the same. We don't speak the same language. And I tell people we're not at the same frequency. And so, I tell any man that works in schools, particularly elementary schools, he's typically bifrequential. He looks, when I show up at a school where it's kind of like one or two guys on the whole campus, which is pretty typical for a lot of elementaries, man, they can't wait to talk to another guy. They're like, hey, could we just grunt and talk? And, and I'm like, yeah, let's go eat some meat or do something. But no, schools have traditionally, and really over the last probably 30 years, we think it's longer than that, but it's really not, 30 to 40 years, have been mainly focused on mom, not just being the stay-at-home person, but the one they communicate with. And our elementaries in particular are typically female-dominated, female-run. And so that's where they're comfortable. The other idea is, as you talked about earlier, as our families have kind of split up, dad was given a back seat, dad was put in the back seat, dad was happy to be in the back seat on some of it. And so we've kind of evolved into this where schools are good with moms, they communicate well with moms, they invite moms, and the dads were not being a part of it. And all the research was pointing out that if a dad's involved, this kid does better. And it's not that mom's not doing her job. It's just that when you've got both people on the team, that kid's going to have a better success rate. And so what the research says, and this is in 96, so this was before we started Strong Fathers, before I actually started working in fatherhood in general, 96 report from the Department of Ed said the number one predictor of student achievement is father involvement. Even if mom's doing all the great things she does, if dad's involved, if he knows who the teacher is, he asks about homework in school, and attends 3 to 4 events a year, that kid is more likely to get A's and B's, less likely to repeat a grade, more likely to be involved in extracurricular activities, less likely to repeat a grade. And so what we know is if that's a kid successful, we'll find a way to help those dads do that. And schools across the country, even now, we've got tons of work to do, as much as we've covered a lot of ground, because not only are there tons of schools, but they're just not understanding a couple of things. How valuable dads are in the education of a kid, because we've not really had that as part of our culture. And they don't think dads will show up. They don't think any families will show up. And we're proving both of those to be, somewhat of a myth. And so by working with schools, the first thing is we've got to let them know what the research says. Because and schools get it. I mean, schools have that feeling in their gut if we could just get these folks on board, I think these kids would do better. But the media has not promoted anything about fathers, particularly what I would call the technical piece, where when a dad reads to his kids' verbal skills can increase by up to 15%. And that doesn't happen when mom's reading to the kid. And people are just blown away by that. And again, mom's doing her job, but when dad does it, it's different. And so there's a different result. And so we tell dads that. We tell schools that. And dads start reading, we see a change in the kid. Discipline is different because mom and dad have a different view on how their kids ought to act and behave. And we need moms that advocate and rescue, us kids. My mom rescued me several times, rescued me from school and my father at the same time. And, but, we need moms to do that. We also need dads to say, you know what, you've got consequences to your actions, because every day that I go to work, every day I go out of this house, I've got to be responsible for actions, and that's, training for, our kids as well. So that balance of mom and dad is really better for kids, and nobody's doing it. I mean, mom's been showing up. And everybody thinks moms show up because, they care more. And that's not the case. Moms show up more because they're invited more. Dads have not been invited. When it says parents, everybody in the world knows or believes that to be mom. And we're trying to prove that, no, it's actually, half our parents in PTA should be men. And we're not anywhere close to that. We're making some strides, but it's not the case.
Mike, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more specifically about some of the programs that you guys offer and what expectations can be on the school side of things.
Fantastic.
Are you an educator, administrator, or school volunteer looking for a simpler way to raise money for your school? Let School Spirit Vending put their hassle-free year-round fundraising program to work for you. School Spirit Vending. We do all the work. You cash the check. Go to schoolspiritvending.com/school zone for all the details. All righty. So we're back. So Mike, talk more specifically. You talked about the dad and kid nights. You talked about the dad to school day. When you do your programs and your curriculum, what are you teaching specifically? Is it purely letting dads know, hey, you need to be more involved, that your involvement is going to improve things for your child? Or, does it go deeper than that?
Well, a lot of it is exactly that message, and because, that's the crux of what we do. What we know is that when we get a dad to understand how important his role is, he will begin to make many more changes than what we ask for. And so on a Bring Your Dad to School day, the dads come and eat breakfast with their kid, which can be an eye-opening experience, to say the least. Breakfast pizza is somewhat of a shocking thing for dads to watch happen in the cafeteria. And what I call plate omelets, these pre-made omelets that the kids eat, looks like they came straight out of, Play-Doh, whatever, the Play-Doh's factory, But the dad's just seeing how the morning starts, and then the dads go to class with their kids, and they're in class with their kids for like 5 minutes. And so they get to see what a regular day looks like. We actually encourage teachers, don't do anything special for the dads. Don't kind of introduction or program, please. Dads don't want it. Dads need to see a regular day, and that's what we need them to see. So dads are in circle time with kindergartners and in second grade, and if the fifth graders are going to PE, dad just goes along with them and sees what that, just to see what that day looks like. And so when the dads come out of that after 45 minutes, we just the dads come back, kids continue their day, and we just ask the dads, what did you see? And so we talk about 15 minutes about how the classroom is so different than when we were in school. And we talk about why. 2/3 of the jobs that our kids in elementary will have when they graduate don't exist yet. Like we're training kids right now for jobs that we don't even know what they're going to be. And so when we talk about the challenges of a school, we're now teaching lifelong learners as opposed to just kids that can regurgitate facts and figures, because the facts and figures are changing so fast. Like kids in kindergarten that will start this year in kindergarten, by the time they graduate, which as a father of 2 kids in college, I will tell you it's a flash. But by the time our kindergartners from this graduate, everything we know in the world will double. So you got 4 times the amount of information that we have right now And you just think about how much information that is. And so kids are not going to be able to memorize all the things they need to know. And so it is about technology. It is about access. It is about thinking. And so the classroom looks different. And then we talk about dad's role. And dad's role is, when you read to your kids, they do better. If you have a daughter and you're physically actively involved with your daughter, where she gets to wrestle with you and she gets to hug you and you get to tell her she's smart and she's beautiful, she can whip every boy on the block, then that girl does better in math and science, and she doesn't believe the hype that girls can't be, engineers and mathematicians and everything else. And so when we tell dads that, and what we tell them is, this is what happens when dads do this. What people do expect us to do is go in there and say, you ought to do this, you ought to do that, you got to do this, you got to do that. None of us as men are really going to respond well to that. That's one reason that guys quit coming to some of these other programs, is because they're very heavy-handed. And they don't mean to be, but we just think we really want to encourage these guys. I would dare say, you as a father, I know me as a father, I know most of the, hundreds of thousands of fathers that I talk to, they know where they're screwing up. They just don't know what to do right. They do things right, but they don't know if they are right. So our job is to say, when you do these things, these are good. If you don't do these things, that's kind of not good. Now you got to decide, what are you doing? What are you not doing? What do you want to change? And it's up to them. But I think by that approach, what we have found is that dads will make changes because it's now on their shoulders. Good to take the responsibility, but if you tell them they're screwing up, they're just, well, then never mind. Evidently, I can't get it right. We're kind of that way. Men are competency-based, and if you tell us enough times, we don't know how to change a diaper, we'll quit changing a diaper. If you're not doing the spelling studying, and all those, if you don't read like mom does, which dads don't like mom does, then dads stop reading. And we've got to encourage these guys to do their job the way they know to do it, the way they want to do it, the way they feel to do it. And they also get to see the kids react to that. So that's part of what our program is at every level, is getting them and kids doing positive things. And instead of me saying, you really ought to do this when you get home, they can't help but do it when they get home because of the reactions they've gotten from their kids. So math night is dads sitting across the table from each other with cards and dice, and we teach them different games, and they play the games. It's just a fun night. And while they're playing the games that we're teaching them, we're also teaching dad how to use those games to teach his kid math skills when he gets home. And he takes the cards and he takes the dice. He takes instructions in English and Spanish home, and they've been taught, and then they, go home and do it. And we've gotten great reports about how those dads do that. With science, we make paper airplanes, mousetrap catapults, Alka-Seltzer rockets, grocery bag parachutes. And the kids are lighting up. The dads are having a great time. It's very simple stuff they can do at home, but they're getting in there and finding out what's possible with their kids. So I don't have to tell them what they ought to be doing. They can't help but do it because it's they see the connection, they feel that love from their kid, and we've told them how important they are, and so now they take on that responsibility.
Mike, I can totally relate to what you're saying about, dads not knowing what they're doing right and oftentimes being told what they're doing wrong. I'll share just a silly little story, but it holds still true today. When I first got married, Amy and I have been married going on 23 years. The first year we were together, and I was in the States because I was an Air Force pilot at the time, we set up a Christmas tree. And I was so excited. She went to work. We had put the tree up, but none of the lights were on it. And I decided I was going to put lights on the tree. So I spent all afternoon putting lights on the tree. I was so proud of myself for doing that. And I was like, this is going to be cool. Amy's going to be excited. We're going to be able to do the ornaments together or whatever. Well, she didn't know any better, but she came home. She did the squint test and pointed out every single spot on the tree where the lights were not properly
spaced.
Right?
Yeah.
What she did by doing that is has affected our tree every year since, because I won't do the lights.
Well, and again, like you said, she had the best of intentions. She's not some right.
You're
a hack. I believe me, I have enough of those stories to fill up a very large shoebox. But that's what we do in schools too. When dads come in and they do it a certain way, and it's not like moms and it's not like teachers, typically female, then yeah, we're not any good, and that's not true. We're just not doing it like, other folks are asking us to do. So
when we were flying, we had something as instructor pilots that we would call technique only. And there were certain things that you had to do a certain way because it was life or death. But then there was a lot of other things that differed from instructor pilot to instructor pilot, and they were all technique. None of them were life-threatening. Everybody did it different. And the students had to learn to understand what was technique and what was not. But then the instructors had to also realize and not judge a student's performance based on the technique that they chose to use or that they were taught from somebody else. And it's the exact same thing. The goal is to accomplish education and support for our kids and to improve the family unit. How we get there varies from house to house, from dad to dad, because we're all wired differently, etc. And too many times we're told not only what to do, but how to do it, instead of being given, and this is not just for dads, but just in life in general, but aren't being given room to grow and kind of figure some of that out for ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the things too. Here's the interesting part though. People, and you're right, how, you and I would run our house very differently. I mean, particularly since I do not have a military background. I'm the last guy I would have never made it. But, we do things, but what's interesting is all of us dads do things very similar. We like to rough and tumble with our kids. Our kids look at us a certain way. We approach things a certain way, and that is white dads, brown dads, black dads. And that's some of the assumptions that people make. It's like, well, these guys father differently. No, they don't. We all love our kids the same. We typically do the same types of activities. Culture makes a difference, upbringing makes a difference, but not in the big things. Your kids probably, unless you're just a really different family, if mom comes home at the end of the day and the kids are there, I'm pretty sure they may run to meet her, but they don't tackle her, they don't wrestle with her, they don't jump on her neck. Maybe the babies do, but it's like, hey mom, and meet my needs and stuff and all that. But when a dad comes home, if your house is anything like mine, I got attacked most of my life. I'd walk in the door and there's kids all over me. And it's when I talk about what dads do and how they do it. I was just in a training up in St. Paul, Minnesota yesterday with a bunch of Head Start teachers. And I would say, this is what dads do. This is why we do it. This is what it looks like. This is how kids respond. And people always tell me, like, it's like you've been in my house. And it's like, no, it's not. Yeah, it's a little freaky, but the whole thing is, when you get a room full of dads and start talking about how we see things, what we believe in, how we approach our kids, what we love about it, it's amazing how similar it is, because we're made a certain way. I talk about masculine parenting, and some people twitch, and I'm like, they feel like we can't say that. But I always do a quick test. I ask everybody in the room, how many of you know boys and girls are different? And they all raise their hand. I'm like, good, because I didn't want to explain that part. How many of you know men and women are different? And of course, I train a lot of women. So when I say, how many of you know men and women are different, you hear this whole undercurrent of, like I kicked his laundry back closer to his basket this morning again. That's a pretty universal thing too. And then I say, so why don't we expect and suspect that boys and girls are different, men and women are different, that moms and dads are different. And then from that, also, there's so many similarities, whether they're stereotypical or not, how dads do. The problem is, in the culture, the stereotype has minimized the way dad does things, and there's not any good dads on TV. That's changing a little bit, but every dad on a commercial is an idiot. We've just had a few in the last couple of years that have been really positive, and we try to bring those out. But dads on sitcoms are dumb. If there's a mom in the picture, then she has to be the smart one, and dad has to be the dumb one. And I'm like, what if you had two parents that were smart? That wouldn't be a bad idea. Of course, it just doesn't make for good TV, I guess. But, so what we try to do is also really promote not spokespeople, not heroes, not, celebrities. If I had a couple of $1 million, I'm pretty sure I could father a little better. Maybe not, but I'd love to give it a shot. Let me put it that way. But our regular blue-collar, hardworking dads are some of the best guys I know because they go to work and they come home and they love their kids and they do everything they do. Every minute they're awake, they're out there trying to make a living and support their kids and make life better for them. And that's what we're trying to promote, through the schools, through the programs, through anything that we're doing in the media, to let people know dads are important in the lives of kids. And when they do this work, kids do better. And that's really what the work is about. The work is really about getting kids to do better. I'm not here for hairy-legged men. I'm here for what those hairy-legged men can do for their kids.
That's awesome. Awesome. Do you have a good profile for a good school, or is it literally any and every school? There's just not enough hours in the day.
Yeah, no, I'm basically booked up through June of next year because we do have schools, for our particular service. That's another reason we went to the curriculum is we just couldn't get everywhere and we never would be able to. And so we spend part of our time training. We're working on videos right now, and the curriculum will come with a video training component that's very quick and short, sets of videos. And so you don't have to watch 8 hours of videos to know how to do this. You watch the facilitator videos, which are probably 30, 40 minutes in length altogether. And you can take those in bite sizes. And then every event that we, promote to do, there's a prepare video, a promote video, and present video. So 5 to 7 minutes on each one of those. So here's how you get all your stuff together. Here's who you got to tell that this is coming up. Don't ever let the lunch ladies not know they got 200 extra people coming for breakfast. That's a bad place to be, and I've been there more than once. And then how to get the flyers together, how to get your supplies together, how to put the flyers out, the stickers out, the posters out. There's certain things that we know make this thing happen, and so we make sure all those elements are part of it. And then for people that are actually doing the programs, hey, tomorrow you're going to do this program. Here's what you got to say. Here's what here's how you need to set up. Here's what you just got to be careful of. Always do this, never do this. But our schools really are just about any school. Of course, elementaries are a cinch. Just families of younger kids. We haven't quite burned them out yet, and their kids are really just focused on school. Whereas when we get into middle school, we've been very successful in middle school, but it's just not. It doesn't look the same. Whereas I'll get 200 dads in an elementary, I'll get 60 to 80 in a middle school, and I kind of want to get upset, and the middle school principals are losing their minds over getting 60 to 80 dads or any parent in the door at a middle school. And I tell them we don't come because you have middle school kids. That's why we don't show up. And, the kids don't spread the word. Middle school kids like their dads around. They just don't remember to get the flyer out like a third grader does, And so that's one of the deals. And then we have a high school program to where it's typically for all kind of, truancy, behavior issues, and things like that. So we talk about it being a carrot and stick.
So, Mike, kind of wrapping up here, if a school wants to talk to you guys about doing some staff training or, bringing some of the campus programs to the school, or, purely just wants to talk about curriculum, what's the best way to reach you guys to begin that dialogue?
Well, our website has most of the information on it, if not all of it, strongfathers.com. Also, if they want to look at the curriculum, just to kind of see what we do, you go to strongfathers.com /strong schools. Another website, and we'll get this to you guys as well, is strongfathers.com /what we do. And we have a whiteboard video that talks about these programs and what they look like. There's a contact button, of course, on our website. We want to help people do this however we can. We don't mind providing them a curriculum and taking their money, but we want people to do this, and we'll help them any way we can. I always tell people, phone calls and emails are free. And, people usually call me and they say, well, yeah, but we have this, or this is going on. And I can tell you, we work in very urban environments. We work in very rural environments, suburban, of course. We work in Head Starts that are considered on paper frontier Head Starts in Texas and in Kansas. And sure enough, there's a building out there, and there ain't nothing there for miles, cotton or potatoes or something. So we tell people this stuff works from the woods to the hoods, and we've proven it to do so. But the main thing is, like I said, not only do we have products and services for people, but anything we can do to help them. They can check us out on Instagram at strong_fathers, because we have thousands of pictures of dads and kids in our events, and it really gives people a feel for that. Facebook is facebook.com/strongfathers, and they can contact us through those things. So I love what you guys are doing. A lot of the schools I go into, have the school spirit box right there, and I'm trying to figure out how to get some kind of Strong Father sticker in there. I haven't figured that out yet, but we need to talk about that. But just what you guys are doing for parents, what you guys are doing for fundraising, and then also there's a lot of good things going on in American public schools, and I don't think we hear enough about that. And we've got a lot of strong families out there. We got folks with issues. All of us do. Our family actually puts the fun in dysfunctional around here, but I work with a lot of great families, and not everybody knows that from the outside. But these are people that love their kids, and most people do, and we just got to find ways to get them to be on the team, and we've got to get schools to be on the team as well. Parents are ready and waiting. And so we're ready to help both the parents and the school come together so we can help kids.
Well, Mike, thank you very much for the time. I know you got a busy schedule, but I'm grateful for the few minutes, and we'll look forward to talking to you real soon.
You bet. I appreciate the opportunity.